What is up, everybody? Happy Monday. Thanks for checking in to our latest TDR Trade to Black podcast. How was everyone's weekend? Sorry I missed you on Friday, but great to be back. Anthony and Guap held fort down and did an incredible job. What'd you all think of that podcast Friday? Leave some comments below. Love to get your feedback. Should they kick me out of the show and have those just two run the show? Maybe not a bad idea. I could go off into retirement, but not so fast. Let's welcome in Mr. Anthony Varrell. Here on a Monday. Good to see you. Good job on Friday. How are things?
Thanks. Good. Good. I mean, this was a good headline to see this morning. I mean, I'm definitely excited to dive into the conversation with Jamie. And I mean, it's two things that I've been lucky enough to be able to invest in and concentrate on for the last 10 years, which has been cannabis and crypto.
Yeah, that title that we created here today, where cannabis collides with crypto. At first glance, before we get into our interview here off the top of the podcast today, but do you think the industry, with more and more of these announcements, that'll attract more companies to consider doing this in the cannabis space, and more importantly, attract more investors to it, especially knowing with how Donald Trump's key issues with his new administration will be that 35 and under crowd?
Yeah, so I think you will see more companies adopt this on a go-forward basis. I don't know about the immediate, but I mean, the one thing is you want to really look at these companies, especially ones that have a lot of cash, in terms of the debasement of the dollar. Because one thing that was not talked about was the strength of the dollar, the debasement of the dollar, and the debt, both on the Democrat side as well as the Republican side. Haven't heard anything so far in terms of the new administration tackling it to any degree. The dollar's been debasing itself for a long time now. We've obviously printed a lot of currency. I do think that Donald Trump probably is going to print more currency. And the best way to combat that in the new age is to hold Bitcoin, not necessarily on your balance sheet and in the treasury of your company, but also personally. It's been one way to absolutely combat inflation and shore up assets with less exposure to fiat.
Yeah. Get a lot of comments coming in right now where people are feeling that now's the time to buy some of these cheap prices. I'm not going into that right now because there's no near-term catalyst. So you do at your own leisure, but right now it's tough to get gamble. Answer the question: Terracin versus Verano versus Fresco. I'm not.
Come back in January. January is going to be the time to start looking at this stuff.
Yeah. So as we said off the top, crypto collides with crypto, more notably LEEF Brands, which trades on the CSE under the ticker symbol LEEF, making bold moves into the crypto space where it would adopt Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. And to learn more about that, let's welcome in their VP of Strategy, Mr. Jamie Warm, to the podcast. First time. Good to see you. Nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Nice. Are things warm where you are? I think you said that you're just outside of LA, and I'm getting ready for Mr. Santa Claus, and I'm sure you are too, but the conditions are probably a little bit more sunny and warm where you are, my friend.
It is sunny. It has been storming. I'm on the coast. I'm in Santa Barbara, and we've got a lot of swell coming in, so all the locals are happy.
There you go. So when did you join LEEF Brands as VP of Strategy?
Yeah, I joined in October. And it was it really surrounded a Bitcoin acquisition strategy.
Okay.
They brought me on specifically for that.
Okay. So with that, I'm looking at this off the top. We align basically two industries, rapid growing industries, which is crypto and obviously cannabis. So how does, I guess, based off of this announcement, by adopting Bitcoin, impact financial stability for companies like yours and LEEF Brands?
Well, Bitcoin is a capital asset, right? Its use case is, and true utility is, to amplify a business plan. Right. What it's allowed companies to do is have a bifurcated business model where you have a P&L strategy, your operational strategy, and then you can amplify it with your balance sheet strategy. So as you accumulate Bitcoin on your balance sheet, and historically Bitcoin has since 2011 grown at 150% year over year, you are adding extraordinary value and growing. Your balance sheet can grow faster than your P&L. And that is effectively what's happened for every company that has adopted a Bitcoin treasury reserve. I'd say additionally, you're accumulating an asset that is now leverageable, and you're doing it through accretive dilution. Trading stock, something that's infinitely dilutable, for a capital asset like Bitcoin, which is impossible to dilute, right? There's 21 million coins. So it's the hardest asset on the planet, harder than gold. It's the most liquid asset. And it's proven itself to be, the most stable and secure digital capital asset network on the planet.
So one thing that I've heard people knock crypto about is the volatility. Like I said, I've been investing in it for 10 years. I've seen cycles, boom and bust. Didn't get into Bitcoin too early, but it was in around 3,000. When we talk about the balance sheet of a company, how are you shielding from the volatility in Bitcoin and potential drawdowns? Because then you're talking about a greater drawdown than potentially, let's say, the debasement of a dollar if crypto does hit those peaks and troughs. So how do you shield against that?
So we look at volatility as vitality, right? Ultimately, right? The volatility is good. It's not something we shy away from. I actually don't want a stable stock price. I want some volatility. Volatility is energy. Volatility is where everybody makes money.
Good point.
Volatility allows us to create an options market. Volatility is simply not something we're scared of. The way you protect your company from a catastrophic event is really comes down to how you contemplate your and structure the investment, right? So for us, it's a Bitcoin backed bond, also known as a Bitcoin backed convertible note. And there's a few ways this has been structured in market, but this is a really common way. I'm sure you've seen MicroStrategy and Marathon Digital Holdings and MetaPlanet and Semler Scientific and Riot just announced a $500 million Bitcoin-backed note. So it's intelligent leverage because it's convertible. It typically, like for us, it converts in 5 years. So we have 5 years for Bitcoin to do its thing. Interest, and then it will convert once you hit a particular price. So everybody gets their conversion, they're in the money, and the company has the asset now, right? So it's a win-win-win. It's a win for the company. They get Bitcoin. It's a win for the investor if they convert, when they convert. And it's a win for the Bitcoin network. It strengthens the network. So just going back to volatility, it's something we embrace. Hopefully as we accumulate more Bitcoin, that our stock price tracks closer to Bitcoin volatility, because that's where money is made.
Okay. Yeah. And then what, for instance, like I know you use MicroStrategy as an analogy, but with your business, LEEF Brands, I mean, you're an operating business. You had 2.1 million, I think, on the balance sheet in cash at the end of Q3. I think you've raised 10 million to date since October 30th. So what percentage of the treasury is going into, let's say, fiat versus Bitcoin? And is that Bitcoin a source of, or can that Bitcoin be a source of liquidity if you need to tap into it for general operations within the business? Yeah,
good question, Anthony. This Bitcoin-backed note is collateralized against the Bitcoin itself. So if it appreciates above $5 million, we can peel cash off, right? Once it converts, right? Once the shareholders convert, we will own it. We can do whatever we want with it. Now, our intention is to hold this forever, right? We want to accumulate as much Bitcoin as possible. In terms of past raises, we just closed a private placement. We announced, I think it was $2.1 million. That's all going to operations. That's building out Salisbury Canyon Ranch. That's, we're still a cannabis company, right? This Bitcoin strategy is very exciting. I think, not just in cannabis, although it is significant for cannabis just due to the headwinds that the industry has in the capital environments and growth. But it's an amplifier to all companies. That's why 60 plus have joined this year alone, not just MicroStrategy. And we've got it's great to highlight, say MetaPlanet. It's a real estate company. I think they have around 1,100 Bitcoin. They've been raising convertible note over convertible note through the end. I think they're up 1,000% on their stock price.
Wow.
You've got Semler Scientific, another one. They just announced today they bought another, I think, 200 Bitcoins. I have to look and see exactly how many they have on their balance sheet, but they've been aggressively accumulating their stock. The S&P is down today, right? The S&P is down today. Every Bitcoin company is up today. And so it's becoming companies on the Bitcoin itself is becoming it's the holy grail, right? That every investor looks for, an uncorrelated asset to the S&P, right? And that's what happened today. You've got, I mean, I'll take it a step further. MSOS is down, right? Is at all-time low today.
All-time low. Bitcoin's at all-time high.
Exactly. LEEF, we gained. I mean, the market clearly liked the news. We're up 20%. So, and I think we're the only. I could be off, but at least most of the big companies I've looked at are all down today. So, you know, it's an asset that the market wants. There's demand for the asset. There's demand for companies that are putting this asset on their balance sheet because the shareholders feel as though it's fortified.
So was the executive team when they reached out to you, is this kind of the mindset, the strategy, is there what they were thinking, or is this something that you brought to them to the table with? Like, how did this all come to fruition? Because the more I hear about this seems like common sense right now. So if you're in a room full of executives in the industry, like, clearly, what are they missing, or what do they don't understand?
There's a lot to the Bitcoin network that's hard for folks to wrap their mind around. A lot of people don't understand it. They don't believe in it. They think it's digital, you know.
AKA they're 35 and older.
The thing is,
like talking, you know, it's talk to your parents, right? And talk to, you know, many investors with capital, 40 and over. It takes time to understand the Bitcoin network and understand its true utility. So, you know, it's just going to be time and performance.
You sound like, I mean, I'm assuming you've been doing this for a while now with Bitcoin. Does it scare you that maybe Bitcoin's kind of lost its way to a certain extent with the amount of adoption it's gotten from financial institutions, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street? I mean, you could argue that with the insane amount of inflows those ETFs are getting, with the buy pressure for them gathering all this Bitcoin, there is a certain centralization that's taking place within, let's say, the financial institutions in this country, most notably.
You know, I'm not too concerned about the centralization right now. I think when we discuss centralization, it's not necessarily, I mean, when you look at the ETFs, right, I think we're at right around 1.2 million plus Bitcoin that have been purchased by global ETFs, around 1.1 in US ETFs, with BlackRock just knocking it out of the park. They all have a fiduciary, right? Those are really, they don't own that. They do technically own the Bitcoin, right? But they are not, there's nothing they can do to really affect the network other than sell it all. And that's really not their Bitcoin, right? It's all the investors' Bitcoin that have to sell that. You know, the big boy in the room is MicroStrategy, right? They're about 450,000 Bitcoin. To my knowledge, they are the largest holder. But we're going to get, the centralization, if we want to have a concern about centralization conversation, I really think the concern needs to be about centralization in mining and how the protocol is governed.
Why is that? Why is that? Can you explain a little bit more on why you have the reasoning for that?
You control 51% of the hashing power. You can control the mining network, which is, keeping track of all the transactions. It is, you can change the rules. You do need the nodes to on board to change the rules as well. But the miners, if there was only one miner, we would have a problem.
Right.
Fortunately,
and then as it relates to getting back to the treasury strategy with like the dynamics of the business, I don't know how MicroStrategy is governed, but let's say, just using LEEF as an example, you are accruing the Bitcoin on the balance sheet. Let's say these debentures become mature, they convert, you have the Bitcoin now. You don't ever have to sell the Bitcoin, correct? You can actually lend. I'm assuming you can lend against it.
That's exactly
to a certain degree. So that asset will perpetually stay on your balance sheet. However, you don't have to actually sell it to recognize the liquidity.
That's exactly right. And there's no taxes paid on debt, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, there's so many interesting nuances to Bitcoin. Think about this. Bitcoin is taxed as property, right? It's digital property. You get taxed on the gains or the losses, capital gains or loss. You can do let's say there's volatility, right? Bitcoin's at $100,000. You buy it, it goes down to $90,000. You can literally do a swap instantaneously. You can swap to let's say Tether to some stable coin and then swap back right into Bitcoin, harvest the loss for your company, and then write it out again, right?
Yeah.
This is where volatility is a good thing, right? This is where money is made. And there's a lot of things. So no, we don't need to sell it. No, our plan is not to sell it. Perhaps we leverage it. It certainly provides companies access to capital in lean times. There's all sorts of people that want to provide debt to, collateralize your Bitcoin. I know Cantor Fitzgerald they might have upsized it, but the last I heard, they have a $2 billion fund for corporations to collateralize their Bitcoin and provide working capital. So, the most exciting thing about a Bitcoin strategy, it comes down to two things, and it impacts the cannabis industry immensely. And it's capital, right? Access to capital, because we don't have that really in the industry, right? We're marginalized to alternative exchanges. We're not on the NASDAQ, right? And growth, right? What is the catalyst for the cannabis industry to grow? Well, I would argue it's Bitcoin. There's an extraordinary investor demand for Bitcoin. Right?
Yeah, but I mean, with all due respect, with all due respect, I would say that it's tarnishing the entire viability of the cannabis sector if you're going to say that putting Bitcoin on the balance sheets now makes cannabis investable. I mean, if I want to invest in Bitcoin, I don't have to go through all of the troubles and trials and tribulations that an operating cannabis business needs to go through just to get exposure to Bitcoin.
Good point.
I think it's a nice to have. I absolutely don't think it's imperative to the investability of the business, let's say, moving forward.
I think there are very few catalysts in the cannabis industry to get investors excited. And
I think you're right.
And
I think you're completely correct.
This is a moment to utilize Bitcoin for capital. It is a moment to utilize Bitcoin for growth. And I think that moment will go on for a long time. I don't think Bitcoin stops growing ever, actually. I think we'll always have volatility. It's not straight line growth. But when you pull it out over 20 years, there's $450 trillion of assets. 0.01% of that money is in Bitcoin. So as it's starting to eat up, let's say, assets like gold, real estate, the bond market, it is going to grow for a long time. The potential for growth is massive. And any industry, this isn't just cannabis, any industry that acquires Bitcoin has, especially at this moment, an asymmetric upside to its peers.
So what kind of? I agree with that statement completely. You lose me when you say that it's making cannabis companies more attractive, because to me that's just a condemnation of the business model of a cannabis business in general. And why
this is a tough business right now. It makes it. It does make it invest. It makes it much more appealing.
So how do you attract, I guess, more investors into the space? Like an announcement like this, I guess you believe that's a step in the right direction. Like we've seen Donald Trump, he has warmed up to the idea of like focusing on his key issues of audiences. They're 35 and under. And why not? Because, I think he won the youth vote by 34 points over the Biden administration. He's got Elon obviously as an advisor. And he's expressed a lot of great interest towards, this crypto bill that he wants to put into place once his new administration comes into play next month. So saying that, we've had a few people comment, like, what happens if Bitcoin goes down? You're a firm believer with all the stuff and the moment it's building that are we just getting started? Do you believe that there's tremendous upside potential? And if so, how does this, I guess, an announcement and a move like this attract more investors to the cannabis space?
Sure. Is Bitcoin going to move up? You have to have a fundamental belief that Bitcoin has tailwind in order to invest in it, or any company that's investing in it, right? And do I believe it has upside? Well, you've got the Bitcoin Treasury Reserve for the United States wants to invest in 1 million Bitcoin over 5 years. You've got the UAE, Japan, El Salvador, Russia, and you name it. Every country is going to follow. The question is who's going first.
Right.
You've got ETFs that are really right now not being purchased by the retail market. You like Charles Schwab and all your brokerage accounts, they're just putting this stuff online. Who's buying is all the it's the Wisconsin retirement fund spending $162 million to buy IBIT. It's the Michigan retirement fund. It's the Houston firefighters retirement fund. I mean, it's these huge pensions. It's smart money. It's smart long-term capital. So is more of that going to pour in? Our belief is yes. Are more state and local municipalities going to invest in Bitcoin? Our belief is yes. Are more companies in the S&P and microcap companies going to put Bitcoin on the balance sheet? Our belief is yes. So of course, we believe that there's massive catalysts for Bitcoin, and it'll propel, certainly our company and the balance sheet to amplify our existing business operation.
Lots to think about. That's for sure. One thing is for sure, and one of the comments was, and this is probably the nature of the industry right now, people are very skeptical on what they don't understand. And I think that's obviously the biggest catalyst, or should say hurdle, that we have to obviously accomplish in this space right now. But have you had many conversations that even outside of your company amongst other people in the industry and what the overall general interest is pertaining to this?
Bitcoin is a massive education campaign. So
for sure.
I'm anticipating these conversations. I look forward to them. I really appreciate you guys having me on here and just being able to talk about this. Not everyone's going to agree with our strategy. And that's okay. This is something that is going to be a proof in the pudding over time. And fortunately, we have 60 plus companies that are doing it with us, and more. I know there were 3 more announcements today, so there's more and more. I think 2025 is a breakout year for Bitcoin at an institutional level.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting to see what happens here in 2025 and 2026. We're very honored and excited to be a part of the journey. We've had some fantastic individuals like Michael Saylor and Simon Garovich and Fred Thiel to lead this, and we're going full steam ahead here. So It is an education campaign. We put a link on our website, and I tried to put continued education on it, specifically pertaining to a corporate Bitcoin strategy. And we're going to, that's part of our platform. We're going to continue to do our best to educate, and it's a big tent. Like I want more cannabis companies in, we're an open book about why this is helpful, not just for LEEF, but for the industry. And I know other companies will join. So, yeah,
well, definitely a conversation we should continue to have, especially as we hear and see more news related to this space, related to the Trump administration. But lots to think about. I know we're probably just scratching at the surface as to how much we need to know, but congrats, obviously, on the news. Be very interesting to see how this attracts, the industry and the interest level, and how it basically brings in more investors to the space. But Jamie, let's keep in touch, and I appreciate you logging on here today with us.
It's my pleasure. Shad and Anthony, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Right.
Lots to think about there.
I think he's right. He's definitely correct in his assumption that this is going to be a trend. This is absolutely going to be a trend. I think it's a trend that companies should be doing, especially ones that are highly liquid. I'm curious to see how everything pans out, but he is correct. I mean, you see the capital inflows going into Bitcoin. Say what you want about it. Say it's greater fool theory. Say it's whatever. You could say whatever you want, but the damn thing's above 100K. Bitcoin is the best performing asset in the last, I think, 15 years, maybe 20 years. And you've got BlackRock, Goldman, JP Morgan, all the big financial institutions are just pumping capital into it. That being said, is it a reason why I'm going to invest in a cannabis business because they have Bitcoin on their balance sheet? I would have to say no.
Yeah. Looking at all these comments, a lot of people contesting the messaging that was taking place, but clearly, as we said, cannabis collides with crypto. Judging by the way our audience is coming back,
it's interesting, but you have to also agree.
I find it interesting for sure.
But you also have to, with this caveat that we didn't talk about, they're buying Bitcoin by diluting the share, by diluting their investors. So they're issuing these debentures that I think convert at a couple hundred shares per debenture, and then once that matures, that hits, and it's going to be interesting to see how it all pans out.
One thing's for sure after this topic, we got to get Mark Yusko back on.
Yeah.
Mark Yusko, I don't know if you guys have gotten a chance. He's phenomenal as far as giving us education and direction.
It works for something like MicroStrategy because MicroStrategy doesn't have an underlying operating business.
Correct.
MicroStrategy is a Bitcoin bank.
Okay.
So if you're a if you're a MicroStrategy shareholder, Saylor goes to market to buy 5 billion more in Bitcoin,
right,
and dilutes everybody down. Sure, that's fine. He's adding Bitcoin to the treasury. I'm invested in a Bitcoin business. But if Ben goes rogue and goes, or Kim goes rogue and goes and buys $100 million worth of Bitcoin off the balance sheet, you could argue that that might not be the best use of funds for the business.
Yeah. Lots to think about. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I try to come up with follow-up questions, but it's still a learning process for me. And I'm sure I'm not alone on that one.
Yeah.
Christopher Brady, we need Don Murphy back. Yeah, actually, we should have Don on before the holiday season just to say hi.
We should.
We'll try and reach out to him actually this week. Hopefully we can get him on maybe Wednesday because Seth Yakutin, our weekly segment, he's off until the holiday season. But we'll try to get Don Murphy on. Thanks for the heads up on that. All right, into the wire. Let's jump into it. We just finished, obviously, topic number 1, and now let's move into topic number 2 as we shift to Pennsylvania. As the state is ramping up its efforts to legalize adult use marijuana in 2025, Governor Josh Shapiro has renewed his call for reform, citing economic opportunities, social equity, and competition with neighboring states. And I can't emphasize on that enough. I'm sure Ohio has something to do with that. So where do you think we're at with this? We've been at a standstill. And from some of the people I've reached out, we've now entered the negotiation stage that this is what Governor Shapiro wants to pass in 2025, but there's a list of Republicans that also want certain things passed. So this is part of a negotiation process right now. But the feedback I got is that they firmly believe that in that negotiation process, adult use in Pennsylvania will pass at some point next year, which would be huge for the space. What's some of the conversations you've had and the feedback that you've received?
Yeah, so I saw the headline today from Marijuana Moment that Governor Shapiro was going to include legalizing cannabis in his tax budget. I then proceeded to see a tweet that had said, well, is Governor Shapiro the new Chuck Schumer? And just likes to say things and put it out there with very little substance and follow through. Texted a couple of people, not going to name names, but they're all in the high ranks of the MSOs that are all in Pennsylvania. They said this is very real this time around. Some iteration of the Street Laughlin bill or some iteration of the legislation that we've seen that would put the adult use cannabis in Pennsylvania. It's real. I'm expect to see movement Q1, Q2. That being said, a little pause, as I think it's Senator or Representative Dan Frankel, who has most recently introduced the bill. He wants state-run cannabis stores with cannabis being sold through state-run dispensaries. I don't want to see that. I don't think anybody else is going to want to see that.
Did he say why? Did he say why? Say it again.
Why? Because I think Pennsylvania has state-run liquor stores, if I'm not mistaken. But that doesn't really fit the mold. I mean, what's going to happen to the current operators that are there if they start to launch state-run stores? To me, that's just not an efficient use of the framework, and that seems to be a rub. That being said, they want social equity, which is good. Roll out a social equity program that will work, hopefully, and will align with the incentives of the current market participants, and then hopefully get something done, like I said, Q1, Q2, 2025. And Pennsylvania is one of those big adult use catalysts. As Jamie alluded to, the cannabis sector is kind of looking for growth. We're kind of looking around like, where is that growth going to come from? Pennsylvania flipping to adult use, not going to be Florida, but it is going to be a certain degree of growth
for sure
for several of the operators there with Cresco, Trulieve. There's several top operators in that market. GTI.
Yeah. And I'm sure, obviously, with the Ohio news that's happened in August, that's obviously grabbed their attention with neighboring states. And then some of the stuff that we talked about last week, you wonder if that how much has to play with the state of New York and how it's quickly turning around. But, you know, this has been a rumor that's been floating around for quite some time now. Like, when did we originally think adult use was going to pass? Like, this has been hovering for what, 18 months, 12 months?
Yeah. It's been a solid 18 months. Oh, yeah, TerraSend are in the Pennsylvania market as well.
Yeah, they are. That's for sure. Well, we'll see what happens.
It'd be nice to happen. It'd be a good small win that we can all actually celebrate, since there hasn't been much as of recent.
Good point. Well, 2025, I keep seeing that. Bring it on, baby. What'd you think of Trump coming out today when he's asked about TikTok and he's got a warm spot for the youth of America and winning the election amongst youths? 34 points is what he had indicated in that press conference that he was announced. But I put out a tweet and I kind of woke some people up. I think some people were questioning about my source, but I did want to address that. But yeah, we've spoken to some pretty influential people that talk about where he stands on cannabis right now. The key question is will it indeed happen? Because everything that we're hearing and seeing is promising for the overall space. But do you think there's some correlation right now with, his warmth, as he said, for the youth as to how that could have maybe an effect eventually in some time related to cannabis, knowing the love he's showing and support he's showing for crypto right now?
I think he's going to get it done regardless. I think Schedule 3 and banking reform are something that we're going to see pretty quick out the gate in 2025, probably the second half.
Okay, I was going to say out of the gate. You think in the first 100 days, but you think this is more of a mid 2025 to back end? Yeah, I agree.
And yes, Mitch, Cresco is the number one operator in Pennsylvania. They have been for some time now.
Yeah. Gretchen, great to see you. Happy holidays. Be a huge win. There's nothing small about the Keystone State. Well said. Good to see you, Gretchen. Good to hear from you. Let's move now to the ALJ. And regarding the ALJ hearing and cannabis rescheduling, where hearings are now facing a critical juncture, the NCIA, the National Cannabis Industry Association, is pushing to cross-examine the DEA, aiming to ensure transparency in the debate to move marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, as we all know. Thank you very much. Do you think this happens? Because this would be good for people that do want rescheduling. You don't think it does?
I don't think it happens. I think the NCIA, if I'm not mistaken, are being defined as an interested party, which would mean that they would be aggrieved by rescheduling, but are also a pro group as well, which is why they've requested two witnesses on the stand. It'd be great. I would love to see the NCIA be able to cross-examine the DEA.
You think? No kidding.
I highly doubt that'll happen.
Well, it would be nice because you look at the schedule, as I said before, I think there's 5 consecutive weeks of people that are against rescheduling, and
it's be nice to have the hearing is supposed to do.
I know.
It's the purpose of the hearing.
Yeah, I hear you. We'll see what happens. But yeah, cross-examine. I'm just seeing some comments here. Gretchen, you think, nope, not going to happen?
No, I would give it I'd less than 0 chance if I could.
Yeah.
That happens.
All right. What do we got scheduled for later this week? We're going to try Don Murphy.
No, there was also in the ALJ, there was a request from the DEA to subpoena certain members of the FDA as well as the HHS that they had included in their homework that was due last week. So that's going to be something that also develops on the ALJ and the Mulrooney angle. And while Judge Mulrooney on December 2nd decided to tell the DEA that they cannot submit their comments from the public comment period, it looks like they're actually going to submit those comments anyway into the record, which he said would look like an act of delay, a purposeful act of delay. So we could possibly get some adversarial back and forth with the ALJ and the DEA come 2025.
Interesting. All right. Well, we'll be watching this closely. That's for sure. Anything else you want to add today? We're 35 minutes in. Anybody want to? Yeah, I saw that interview with Brian Lanza, and I thought it was good. The guy that basically hosted it, we're going to be bringing him on more and more. Big Mike from Advanced Nutrients. Good guy. We met him actually out in Vegas, and he is Big Mike. What is he? 6'6", 6'7"? But what a company he's actually been running around. But he's one of the real OGs of this industry before it actually became a business. But he's been involved for 15 plus years in the space. But we've reached out to his team. Hope to have him on later this week. But I didn't see all the podcasts, but what were some of the key takeaways, some of the questions that were asked during that actual interview? Did you get a chance to see it?
The Lanza interview?
Yeah.
I've watched bits and pieces of it. It was good. I think Gretchen is correct that it was very light on actual strategy. If you could get a main or key takeaway from it, Trump's for medical. He's for banking reform. He's for states' rights. He's not for rec. That's it. That's looking at it objectively. I don't think we get any sort of sweeping reform as it relates to recreational cannabis from the Trump administration. That's my main key takeaway from it. He's for medical, states' rights, and banking. And if we got to deal with what we got to deal with, we'll get Schedule 3, we'll get some sort of banking reform, and we'll be all the better for it.
I think that would be massive just for those wins as well. I think that's a safe approach, and I don't mean safe banking. I just think that's a safe approach for him to address the issue. First things first, let's get some research underway. But
unification. Unification was another big theme from that video. The industry doesn't act unified. He was calling that out, and I think he's got firsthand accounts from people that he's been working with. We need to have a unified strategy going into Washington.
I think that's going to change.
Hopefully it does.
Well, from what we've seen in here, if we're going to have some strong lobbying in place, like shit just got real. I know like Amendment 3 was a bad night for the space, but in a lot of ways, it's moment of truth time for this industry, and everybody's at play right now. And that's why, maybe this is just the route that we've got to take to obviously get anything passed, because it just seemed like before, who knows what the industry would have looked like. I know you've said before, no, this is not a good thing that Amendment 3 didn't pass, but at the same time too, it's just like, could we fast track the amount of companies that were left in the overall space had Amendment 3 passed? Because we saw obviously the leading MSOs, they were going to dominate. They already were dominating amongst other companies in the space. However, with this change, everybody's got to come together and have the proper information, the proper representatives in Washington, which has obviously been a big challenge. And I don't know why it's been a big challenge, but it has been a challenge from our experience being there. The businesses don't agree with social advocates, and no one gets along with hemp. Writes Gretchen, we need to agree on a priority list. Well, first things first, let's get that priority list underway and figure out what that is.
I'm going to bet that the MSOs will agree with hemp very much so once there's closure and clarity as to what's going to happen in that industry. Because like Wap and I had said on Friday, I mean, I could see some of the MSOs picking up high-performing assets in the hemp space once there is clarity on what's going to go on a go-forward basis, and they can actually see that hemp's not going to get regulated out of existence.
Yeah, Gretchen, unification is never at the Capitol happening. I like and agree with a lot of stuff you're saying. Completely disagree with you on that based on the conversations that we've had a couple weeks ago. Shad, can you confirm or deny the presence of floating and UFOs in the airspace above where TDR broadcasts from? Have you seen this story about all these drones in New Jersey?
I have.
I don't know what to make of that, but I can't confirm or deny. That wraps things up here today. And coming up later this week, panel discussion with Bina Goldenberg, Michael DiGiulio, and David Klein. By the way, we had a great conversation with David Klein this morning. We're going to be posting that tomorrow at 4:00 regarding the news last week regarding acreage. Very good conversation. We also touched on the new CEO, Luke, that's going to be coming on starting next month, some of his strengths that he found, but it sounds like from what he said, he's been a board member, understands the business, so he will hit the ground running in 2025 was a lot of the reasons why he was appointed in that position. But good interview, didn't you think?
Yeah, it was a great interview. It was a good interview. We addressed the cash position in acreage. We addressed some of the concerns with acreage, and then really David set the tone for what CUSA and Canopy are going to look like in the quarters to come.
Yeah. And what kind of ownership Canopy has of CUSA, which was 84%, if I'm correct, right?
I think it was 86, 14% outside investment, something like that. It was either or. Not split hairs.
So all of you Canopy growth investors, or even people interested in the space that are asking about Canopy, make sure to log on tomorrow, 4:00. That will go pre-record, but Anthony and I had our interview with David Klein, which again, we're posting tomorrow at 4:00. As usual, make sure to scan that QR code, reach to the right here of the template, subscribe to our Baked In newsletter. Lots going on as we gear up the holiday season. We'll also be having at some point in the next 2 weeks, our top 10 developments for the year in cannabis. What are the top 10? Let us know your thoughts. Leave some comments below. We'd love to get you guys or hear from everybody on what they thought were the top 10 developments. We pretty much already have our list already created, but always open-minded to hear if there's any ideas or suggestions that our viewers have as well, and we'll include that in the video. In the meantime, sir, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you back here Wednesday at 4:00.
Thanks, everybody. Talk soon on Wednesday.
Now, that was a good one. What'd you guys all think? Did you like what we had to say here today? Do you agree, disagree with what we're saying? Love to get your feedback. As usual, leave comments below. Trade to Black is growing, and we wouldn't have done it without you. So if you haven't done so, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify for the audio version. And as usual, leave lots of comments. We, as I said, love to hear back from you. Thanks again, everybody, for watching.